I'm Ethan, 32, a software engineer who's been quietly supporting my family financially for years while living at home. My sister Rachel has always been manipulative, but I never thought she'd accuse me of stealing her precious necklace just to call me a liar. That false accusation led my parents to kick me out, completely unaware that I was the financial backbone paying Rachel's college tuition and all the household bills. What they didn't expect was that I'd simply stop all payments and walk away. Before I dive into this life-changing story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family injustice. My journey to becoming the unappreciated financial support of my family wasn't something I had planned. After graduating with a computer science degree from the University of Michigan, I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Chicago. The timing was perfect. The company was expanding rapidly, and my skills in software development were in high demand. Within 2 years, I had been promoted twice and was earning a salary that surprised even me. Initially, my decision to stay with my parents was purely practical. Chicago's rental market was expensive, and I figured I could save money for a down payment on my own place while enjoying my mother's cooking. It seemed like a win-win situation at the time. I agreed to pay a modest amount for room and board, which my parents gladly accepted. Everything changed about 3 years ago. My father Thomas had built a moderately successful construction supplies business over 2 decades. He wasn't a corporate giant, but he made enough to provide us with a comfortable middle-class life in the suburbs. The business had weathered previous economic downturns, but a combination of increased competition, some poor investment decisions, and health issues led to its rapid decline. I still remember the night Dad sat at the kitchen table, his face ashen as he explained to Mom that he might have to declare bankruptcy. My mother Linda, always the optimist, insisted they would figure something out. She immediately started looking for work and found a part-time position at a local department store. But the reality was harsh. Her income barely covered groceries, let alone the mortgage on our 4-bedroom house or the utilities. My parents were from that generation that valued appearances. They couldn't bear the thought of downsizing or admitting to friends and neighbors that they were struggling financially. I watched them grow more anxious each month as bills piled up on the counter. One evening, I found my mother crying over the mortgage statement. Without thinking twice, I offered to help temporarily. "Just until Dad gets back on his feet," I said. Mom hugged me tightly, relief washing over her face. What started as a temporary arrangement quietly transformed into something permanent. I began by covering the mortgage, setting up an automatic transfer to their account each month. Then came the utility bills: electricity, water, internet, property taxes. Before I knew it, I was essentially paying for everything. I never made a big deal about it. I simply took care of things behind the scenes. My salary continued to increase as I moved to a larger tech company, and my remote work arrangement gave me the flexibility to manage these responsibilities without much stress. Then came the situation with my sister Rachel. 4 years younger than me, Rachel had always been the family favorite. While I was the practical, reliable son, Rachel was the charming, outgoing daughter who could wrap anyone around her finger, especially our parents. When Rachel got accepted to Northwestern University for her master's program, it should have been a moment of both pride and financial panic for my parents. The tuition was steep, and with their financial situation, it was clearly impossible. I overheard their conversation about possibly telling Rachel she would need to choose a less expensive school or take out substantial loans. Seeing my sister's dream potentially crushed, I made another decision that would later come back to haunt me. I approached my parents with a suggestion. "I can help with Rachel's tuition. She doesn't need to know it's coming from me." My parents initially refused, but their resistance was half-hearted. Within a week, they accepted my offer with tearful gratitude. Rachel began her program, blissfully unaware that her older brother was funding her education. She came home on weekends, often complaining about the subpar campus food or how she needed new clothes for networking events. All while I sat quietly, transferring thousands of dollars each semester to ensure she could continue her education without worry. Despite my financial contributions, the family dynamic remained strangely unchanged. At dinner, my parents would gush over Rachel's academic achievements or social connections. My own professional accomplishments were acknowledged with polite nods and quick subject changes. Rachel would often interrupt me mid-sentence to share some anecdote about her professors or classmates, and my parents would immediately give her their full attention. I accepted this treatment partly because I'd grown accustomed to it over the years and partly because I took pride in being the reliable one, the problem solver who kept things running smoothly. I didn't need the spotlight. Knowing I was helping my family was reward enough. Or so I told myself. Meanwhile, my own financial portfolio was growing steadily. I had made some smart investments in tech stocks and had been contributing the maximum to my 401k each year. While paying for my family's expenses limited my saving capacity somewhat, I was still building a solid financial foundation for myself. I had started researching condos in nicer parts of the city, planning to finally move out within the next year or so. Little did I know that my carefully constructed arrangement was about to collapse because of a missing necklace and my sister's false accusation. Rachel's 24th birthday fell on a Saturday in April. My parents organized a small family gathering at home, inviting a few relatives and some of Rachel's closest friends. I contributed by ordering an expensive cake from her favorite bakery and helped Mom prepare the house for guests. The highlight of the evening came when my parents presented Rachel with their gift, a family heirloom necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. It was a delicate gold piece with a small emerald pendant, not particularly valuable in terms of market price, but priceless in sentimental value. My grandmother had worn it at her wedding and had specifically mentioned in her will that it should go to her granddaughter when she turned 24, the age my grandmother was when she married. "This is absolutely gorgeous!" Rachel exclaimed, immediately putting it on and rushing to the mirror. She spent the rest of the evening showing it off to everyone, making sure all her Instagram photos captured the glinting pendant. I gave Rachel a gift card to her favorite clothing store, which she accepted with a distracted, "thanks," before returning to conversations with her friends. It was the usual dynamic, and I was used to it. Over the next few weeks, Rachel wore the necklace constantly, even to casual outings where such a piece seemed out of place. She wasn't particularly careful with it either, often tossing it onto her dresser when she came home or leaving it in the bathroom after showering. I remember thinking that if our grandmother could see how carelessly her precious heirloom was being treated, she would be dismayed. About a month after her birthday, the peaceful routine of our household was shattered by Rachel's piercing scream from upstairs. Everyone rushed to her room to find her frantically rummaging through her jewelry box, drawers pulled open, clothes scattered across the floor. "The necklace is gone!" she cried, her eyes wild with panic. "Someone took Grandma's necklace!" My father immediately took charge, helping her search methodically through her room while my mother called the other places Rachel had been recently to see if she might have left it somewhere. I offered to help search but was told to "just stay out of the way" by Rachel. After 2 hours of unsuccessful searching, my father called a family meeting in the living room. We sat in our usual spots, the tension palpable. "This necklace is irreplaceable," my father began, his voice grave. "If anyone knows anything about where it might be, now is the time to speak up. No questions asked?" We sat in silence for a moment before Rachel suddenly turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "It was you, wasn't it?" she accused, pointing a finger directly at me. "You've always been jealous that Grandma specified the necklace was for me." I was genuinely shocked by the accusation. "What are you talking about? Why would I take your necklace? I saw you hanging around my room yesterday," she continued, her voice rising. "You probably took it then. You've always been jealous of everything I get. You probably think it's unfair that Grandma left it to me instead of giving you something too." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed, but the serious expressions on my parents' faces stopped me. They were actually considering this possibility. "Rachel, that's ridiculous. I was at work all day yesterday. I didn't even come home until after dinner. You were already out with your friends when I got back." "Liar!" she spat. I specifically remember seeing you near my room in the afternoon. I pulled out my phone, opening my work calendar. Look, I had meetings from 9 to 4 yesterday. I was on video calls. My entire team can verify I was online. Plus, the security system shows when we enter and leave the house. Check the logs. My father waved his hand dismissively. Those systems can be fooled. And you could have taken the necklace any time in the past few days. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, seriously? Why would I want Rachel's necklace? What would I even do with it? Sell it? Wear it? This makes no sense. My mother, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Ethan, if you took it as some kind of joke or to teach Rachel to be more careful with it, just say so. We won't be angry if you return it now. The fact that my own mother thought I might have stolen the necklace, as a joke, was both hurtful and infuriating. I had never given them any reason to doubt my honesty or integrity. In fact, I was the one keeping the household afloat financially, though they seemed to conveniently forget that fact. I did not take the necklace, I stated firmly, looking each of them in the eye. I have no idea where it is, but I suggest Rachel think carefully about where she last had it instead of making false accusations. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears, a tactic I'd seen her use countless times when she wasn't getting her way. Why are you being so mean? That necklace means everything to me. If you didn't take it, why won't you help us look for it? I offered to help search earlier, and you told me to stay out of the way, I reminded her. And now you're accusing me of stealing. Why would I want to help you after that? My father stood up, his face reddening with anger. That's enough, Ethan. Your sister's upset, and you're not helping the situation. If you know where the necklace is, now is the time to come clean. The conversation was becoming circular and increasingly frustrating. No matter what logical points I raised, they had already decided I was somehow involved. Rachel's accusation had planted a seed of suspicion that was rapidly taking root. Check her car, I suggested, remembering how Rachel often took off jewelry while driving. Check her gym bag. Check with her friends. She's probably misplaced it, and it's easier to blame me than admit she was careless with a family heirloom. This suggestion only inflamed the situation further. Rachel burst into dramatic sobs, and my mother rushed to comfort her. My father pointed a finger at me, his voice rising to a shout. How dare you accuse your sister of lying? She's devastated about losing Grandma's necklace, and instead of helping, you're trying to shift blame. I'm very disappointed in you, Ethan. The irony of his statement was not lost on me. Rachel could accuse me without evidence, and it was accepted as possible truth. When I suggested alternative explanations, I was attacking her character. The family meeting devolved into a shouting match, with my father and Rachel on one side and me on the other. My mother occasionally attempted to mediate but ultimately sided with them. The more I defended myself, the more convinced they became of my guilt. Eventually, my father delivered an ultimatum that would change everything. Enough! My father shouted, slamming his hand on the coffee table. The sound echoed through the living room, silencing everyone momentarily. His face had turned a dangerous shade of red, veins protruding on his forehead in a way I'd rarely seen. I've had enough of this, Ethan. He continued, his voice lowered but trembling with anger. Either you confess to taking the necklace and return it right now, or you need to leave this house. I stared at him in disbelief, looking for any sign that he wasn't serious. There was none. Behind him, Rachel's tear-streaked face carried an unmistakable expression of smug satisfaction. She'd achieved exactly what she wanted, turning my parents against me completely. My mother sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Please, Ethan, she whispered. Just tell us where it is. We can forget this whole thing happened. The realization that my own mother believed I was capable of such petty theft cut deeper than my father's anger or Rachel's manipulation. For years I had been the one keeping this family financially afloat, making sacrifices, never asking for recognition. And this was how they repaid me, with suspicion and ultimatums. I took a deep breath, my decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. I did not take Rachel's necklace. I have never lied to any of you, and I'm not starting now. If you don't believe me, then I guess I'm leaving. A heavy silence filled the room. Perhaps they had expected me to cave under pressure, to fabricate a story about borrowing the necklace to teach Rachel responsibility, or some other excuse. The fact that I was choosing integrity over their approval seemed to genuinely surprise them. "You're choosing a necklace over your family?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "No, Mom. I'm choosing the truth over a lie. I'm choosing self-respect over being falsely accused. You're the ones choosing a necklace over believing your son." I stood up and walked to my room without another word. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled my suitcase from the closet and began packing essentials: clothes, toiletries, important documents, my laptop. I could come back for the rest of my belongings later, or perhaps I'd simply replace them. Material things suddenly seemed so insignificant. As I packed, a quiet realization dawned on me. No one in my family had any idea that I was the one keeping the household running financially. The mortgage, utilities, property taxes, Rachel's tuition, all of it was being automatically handled through my accounts. Once I left, those payments would stop unless I specifically chose to continue them. I zipped up my suitcase and took one last look around the room that had been mine since childhood. The walls were still adorned with my high school diploma and college graduation photos. A bookshelf contained novels and technical manuals I'd collected over the years. This had been my sanctuary, but now it felt like a symbol of a relationship built on convenience rather than respect. When I emerged with my suitcase, my family was still in the living room. My father stood with his arms crossed, his expression hardened with stubborn pride. My mother looked torn, wringing her hands but making no move to stop me. Rachel sat on the couch, her earlier smugness replaced with a slight uncertainty, as if she hadn't expected things to escalate this far. "This is your last chance, Ethan," my father said. "Tell the truth about the necklace, or walk out that door." I looked at each of them one by one, memorizing their faces in this moment. "I've already told you the truth. I hope someday you realize that." With those words, I walked to the front door. No one followed me, no one called out for me to stop. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. Standing in the driveway with my suitcase, the reality of my situation hit me. I was 32 years old and suddenly homeless. But strangely, alongside the uncertainty and hurt, I felt something unexpected: relief. The weight of unappreciated responsibility had been lifted, and for the first time in years, I was answerable only to myself. I got into my car and drove to a hotel near my office. The Marriott was clean, comfortable, and anonymous, exactly what I needed. After checking in, I sat on the edge of the bed in my temporary home and pulled out my laptop. It was time to make some decisions. That night in the impersonal hotel room, I allowed myself to process the day's events. The betrayal stung deeply. These were people who should know my character, who should trust me implicitly based on years of proven reliability and honesty. Instead, they had chosen to believe the worst of me based on Rachel's accusation alone. I ordered room service and opened my financial management software. One by one, I reviewed the automatic payments I had set up for my family. The monthly mortgage payment, $2,450. Electricity and water, approximately $380 per month. Internet and cable, $210 per month. Property taxes, $8,600 annually, paid quarterly. Home insurance, $1,800 annually. Rachel's tuition, $23,000 per semester. Various credit card payments for my parents, roughly $800 monthly. The numbers were staggering when totaled. I had been spending nearly $60,000 a year supporting my family, not including occasional extras like home repairs or medical bills I'd covered. That was money that could have gone toward my own home, investments, or even simply experiences and memories I'd foregone to help them. My finger hovered over the Cancel recurring payments. Button. Was I being petty? Would stopping these payments make me as manipulative as Rachel? I pondered this moral question deeply, eventually reaching a conclusion: continuing to financially support people who had shown such fundamental disrespect wasn't generosity, it was self-harm. One by one, I canceled the automatic payments. Not out of revenge, but as a necessary step toward establishing boundaries and self-respect. I drafted emails to notify the mortgage company, utility providers, and Rachel's university that I would no longer be making payments on these accounts. I set them to send in the morning, giving myself one night to reconsider if needed. The next day, I contacted a lawyer friend for advice on protecting myself legally. While I had no formal obligation to continue supporting my family financially, I wanted to ensure all my bases were covered. She recommended documenting all past contributions and keeping records of the false accusation and ejection from the house, just in case. Family financial situations can get messy, she warned. Better to have documentation and not need it than the other way around. I spent the next day creating a detailed spreadsheet of every payment I had made on behalf of my family over the past 3 years, complete with dates, amounts, and categories. The grand total made me wince. I had been far more generous than I'd realized, and that generosity had been met with shocking ingratitude. As I closed my laptop that evening, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: hurt at the betrayal, anger at the injustice, but also a growing sense of liberation. For the first time in years, every dollar I earned would go toward my own well-being and future. That realization, despite the circumstances that led to it, felt surprisingly empowering. 3 days after leaving my parents' home, I set my plan into motion. First, I sent formal emails to all the service providers, informing them that I would no longer be responsible for payments on accounts that weren't in my name. For utilities, this meant they would revert to billing the account holders, my parents. For Rachel's university, I contacted the financial aid office to explain that I would not be continuing payments for the upcoming semester. I was careful in my wording, making it clear that this wasn't a sudden decision made in anger, but rather a necessary financial adjustment following my change in living situation. The last thing I wanted was for this to appear vindictive, even though part of me did feel a grim satisfaction knowing the financial reckoning that awaited my family. With the financial separation in progress, I turned my attention to finding a more permanent place to live. The hotel was comfortable but expensive and impersonal. I had always been drawn to the River North area of Chicago with its vibrant atmosphere and proximity to both work and recreation. Now was my chance to finally live where I wanted. My realtor showed me several options, but I fell in love with a one-bedroom apartment in a modern high-rise. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline, the building had a well-equipped gym and rooftop pool, and the location was perfect for my lifestyle. The rent was steep, but now that I wasn't supporting 4 other people, it was well within my budget. I signed the lease that same day and arranged for a moving company to collect the remainder of my belongings from my parents' house when I knew they wouldn't be home. I didn't want another confrontation. I simply wanted my things and a clean break. Furnishing the new apartment became a therapeutic project. For the first time, I could choose items that reflected my personal taste without considering anyone else's preferences. I selected a sleek, modern sofa, a dining table made of reclaimed wood, and artwork that spoke to me. Every purchase felt like an affirmation of my new independence. About a week after I left, the first text message from home arrived. It was from my mother. "There's something wrong with the electricity. Bill says overdue? Call me." I didn't respond immediately. 2 days later, another text. "Water shut-off notice came today. Is this some kind of mistake?" Finally, my father called. I let it go to voicemail, not quite ready for that conversation. His message was terse. "Ethan, the mortgage payment wasn't made this month. The bank sent a warning. What's going on? Call me back." The most telling message came from Rachel. "The university financial office says my tuition for next semester hasn't been paid. There must be some error in the system. Can you fix it?" It was remarkable how none of these messages contained an apology, or even acknowledged how they had treated me. They were focused solely on the inconveniences they were experiencing, not on the rift in our relationship that had caused these problems. After consulting with my lawyer friend again, I drafted a brief, factual email and sent it to all 3 family members. I want to clarify the financial situation to avoid any misunderstandings. For the past 3 years, I have been paying the mortgage, all utilities, property taxes, and Rachel's university tuition. This was my choice, and I never asked for recognition or repayment. However, given recent events and my change in living situation, I am no longer able to continue these payments. All accounts have been returned to their primary holders, you, and all service providers have been notified of this change. I have attached documentation of all payments I have made on your behalf since 2020 for your records. This totals $178,456.32. I wish you the best in resolving these financial matters. Ethan. I attached the spreadsheet I had created documenting every payment, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. It was direct, factual, and free from emotional language or accusations. Just the unvarnished truth they had been either unaware of or willfully ignoring. The response was immediate and varied. My mother called within minutes, leaving a tearful voicemail asking if this was some kind of joke. My father sent an email demanding an explanation for why I had hidden these payments from them and accusing me of financial manipulation. Rachel's response was the most telling: complete silence. I didn't engage with any of their responses. I had said what needed to be said and provided the evidence to back it up. The ball was in their court now. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new life with surprising ease. My apartment quickly became a sanctuary, a place where I could relax without walking on eggshells or managing others' emotions. I reconnected with friends I had neglected due to family obligations, joined a local rock climbing gym, and even started dating again, something that had taken a backseat during my years of financial caretaking. At work, my performance improved without the constant drain of family stress. My manager noticed the change, commenting on my increased focus and creativity. I was offered the opportunity to lead a new project, which I eagerly accepted. My career, which had always been successful, now began to truly flourish. I also started seeing a therapist to process the complex emotions surrounding the family break. She helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of financial abuse. My family had become dependent on my support, while simultaneously failing to respect or appreciate me. Breaking free from that dynamic, while painful, was a necessary step toward a healthier life. You didn't abandon them, she assured me during one session. You simply stopped allowing them to take advantage of your generosity. There's a big difference. As the weeks passed, the messages from my family evolved from confusion and anger to increasing desperation. My mother's texts became pleading, describing how they were struggling to make ends meet. My father, his pride evidently wounded, sent fewer messages, but those he did send carried a tone of grudging acknowledgement that perhaps they had been taking me for granted. Rachel, interestingly, broke her silence with a text that read simply, "I can't afford to continue at Northwestern without the tuition being paid. I might have to drop out mid-program. Is that what you want?" I found it fascinating that even now, she framed the situation as my responsibility, my decision, my fault. There was no acknowledgement of her role in the false accusation that had precipitated everything, no mention of the necklace, and certainly no apology. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't being cruel. I was giving myself the space I needed to heal and them the opportunity to truly face the consequences of their actions and dependencies. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling destructive patterns, even when that means watching them struggle temporarily. 2 months into my new life, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike his previous communications, this one had a different tone. "Ethan, we need to talk. Not about money, but about family. We're selling the house, it's too expensive to maintain. Your mother and I have found a smaller place. Rachel is taking a leave from university to work and save money. I think we all need to meet and clear the air. Let me know if you're willing. Dad. It was the first sign that my family was beginning to adapt to their new financial reality, and perhaps gaining some perspective on the dynamics that had led to our estrangement. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to consider whether I was ready for such a meeting and what boundaries I would need to establish if I agreed. In the meantime, I continued building my independent life, day by day growing more comfortable in my own skin and more confident in my decision to prioritize my well-being. The hurt hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had evolved into something more like a dull ache rather than an acute pain. Progress, not perfection. By the third month of our separation, reports of my family's escalating financial difficulties reached me through various channels. My aunt called to ask if I knew that my parents had listed their house for sale. A former neighbor emailed to mention seeing a "past due" notice taped to their front door. One of Rachel's friends, who had always been friendly with me, sent a Facebook message saying Rachel had withdrawn from university and moved back home. These updates affected me in ways I hadn't anticipated. While I stood firm in my decision to stop the financial support, I couldn't help but feel concerned about their well-being. They were still my family, despite everything. The mortgage situation had apparently reached a critical point. According to my aunt, the bank had issued a formal warning after 3 missed payments. My parents, who had been living in that house for over 25 years, now faced the very real possibility of foreclosure if they couldn't sell it quickly enough. The utilities situation wasn't much better. My mother had been borrowing money from her sister to keep the electricity on, but the water had been shut off briefly before they managed to make a partial payment. They were learning the harsh reality of living on their actual income rather than the artificially sustained lifestyle I had been funding. Rachel's situation was perhaps the most dramatic shift. After years of focusing exclusively on her education and social life without financial concerns, she now found herself working 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop and another, as a retail associate, at the mall. Her dreams of completing her master's program had been put on indefinite hold. The first direct contact attempt came from my father, who left a voicemail that sounded uncharacteristically humble. "Ethan, it's Dad. Look, I know things didn't end well, and I think we need to talk. Not over the phone. In person. There are some things that need to be said face to face. Call me back when you can." My mother's approach was more emotional. She sent a long email detailing how difficult things had become, interspersed with expressions of missing me and questioning where our family relationship had gone so wrong. While she didn't explicitly apologize for doubting me, there was a new tone of reflection in her words that hadn't been present before. Rachel, surprisingly, was the last to reach out. Her text message was brief but significant. "The necklace turned up. Found it in my car's glove compartment. I must have put it there when I was driving to Jenna's party and forgot. Mom and Dad want to tell you." I stared at that message for a long time, emotions churning. The necklace that had been the catalyst for our family's implosion had simply been misplaced by Rachel exactly as I had suggested during our argument. The vindication I felt was tempered by frustration that it had taken this long for the truth to emerge. Later that same day, I received another text from Rachel. "Mom and Dad made me call you about the necklace. They're pretty mad at me. I didn't mean for all this to happen. It was just a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. Such a convenient minimization of what had actually occurred. She had explicitly accused me of theft, doubled down when I denied it, and allowed me to be thrown out of my home rather than consider she might have misplaced the necklace herself. Now that the consequences had caught up to her, it was reduced to a simple misunderstanding. I didn't respond to her text. Some apologies are so insufficient they don't deserve acknowledgement. Meanwhile, my parents' financial situation continued to deteriorate. They had found a buyer for the house but at a significantly lower price than they had hoped for. The housing market in their area had cooled, and they couldn't afford to wait for a better offer. They were looking at rental apartments now. A dramatic downsize from the spacious family home they had enjoyed for decades. My father, at 61, was job hunting for the first time in nearly 30 years. His outdated resume and limited computer skills made this especially challenging in the current job market. My mother had increased her hours at the department store and taken on additional shifts at a local diner to help make ends meet. The physical toll of being on her feet all day at 58 years old was evident in her increasingly frequent complaints of back pain, according to my aunt. Rachel's university crisis had reached its conclusion. She had officially withdrawn from her program. The financial aid office had been unable to offer a package that would allow her to continue without my support, and her part-time jobs barely covered her basic expenses, let alone tuition. Years of academic work and career planning had been derailed, and she was facing the prospect of repaying the student loans she had accumulated for previous semesters. Despite my emotional distance from their situations, I couldn't help but track these developments with a mixture of concern and, admittedly, a sense of justified consequences finally being realized. They were experiencing for the first time what actual financial independence meant, something I had been quietly facilitating for years while receiving little appreciation or respect in return. About 4 months after our separation, I received a formal email from my father, clearly written with great care. Dear Ethan, your mother Rachel and I would like to request a family meeting. We propose meeting at Giovanni's restaurant this Sunday at 1 p.m. We understand if you're hesitant, but we believe this conversation is long overdue. We have all had time to reflect on recent events and our family dynamics. There are things that need to be acknowledged and discussed. Please let us know if you can attend. If the location or time doesn't work for you, we're open to alternatives. Sincerely, Dad. The formality of the email spoke volumes about how much our relationship had changed. This wasn't a casual family dinner invitation. It was a carefully worded request for reconciliation talks. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to accept the invitation. She helped me establish clear boundaries for the meeting and prepare emotionally for what might be a difficult conversation. I would hear them out, but I would not allow myself to be manipulated or guilted into resuming financial support. I replied with a brief confirmation, adding that I would meet them for lunch but would be arriving and leaving separately. Setting this boundary from the outset felt important. I was willing to talk, but I was attending as an independent adult, not as the family member who could be taken for granted. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with anticipation and anxiety. I rehearsed what I might say, prepared responses to potential accusations or guilt trips, and reminded myself repeatedly that I had done nothing wrong by stopping financial support that had never been my obligation in the first place. Sunday arrived, and with it, the moment of truth. As I drove to Giovanni's, a restaurant we had frequented for family celebrations and happier times, I couldn't help wondering if this meeting would mark the beginning of a new, healthier chapter in our family story or simply reinforce why separation had been necessary. Giovanni's restaurant hadn't changed. The same red checkered tablecloths, the same framed photos of the Italian countryside, the same aroma of garlic and tomato sauce. What had changed was the family sitting at our usual corner table. I arrived precisely at 1 p.m. to find them already seated, an unusual occurrence given my father's habitual lateness. They looked up as I approached, and I was struck by how much they had aged in just 4 months. My father's hair seemed grayer, his face more lined. My mother had lost weight, the circles under her eyes more pronounced. Rachel sat with uncharacteristic stillness, her usual animated presence subdued. Ethan, my mother said, half rising from her seat. She seemed unsure whether to hug me or not. I resolved the question by extending my hand for a handshake instead. The formality felt necessary, a physical representation of the new boundaries I had established. Thanks for coming, my father said, his voice gruff with what might have been emotion. He too seemed uncertain about the proper greeting, settling for a nod. Rachel barely made eye contact, mumbling a quiet, "Hi," as I took my seat across from them. The awkwardness was palpable, for people who had lived together for decades, now virtually strangers. A waiter approached to take drink orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. Once he left, my father cleared his throat. "I think we should address the elephant in the room first," he began. The necklace was found in Rachel's car, just as you suggested it might be. He glanced at Rachel, who studied the tablecloth intently. We owe you an apology for not believing you. It was a start, but the phrasing struck me as still somewhat evasive. We owed me an apology, not, I was wrong to accuse you or Rachel was wrong to lie. I appreciate that acknowledgement, I replied carefully. But I think there's more to discuss than just the necklace. My mother nodded, reaching for her water glass with a slightly trembling hand. We've had a lot of time to think about everything. The financial situation, how we've treated you, the expectations we've had. It's been eye-opening. That's one way to put it, my father added with a mirthless laugh. Another way would be to say we've been living in a fantasy world that you were silently funding, and we were too self-absorbed to notice or appreciate it. His candor surprised me. This was more direct acknowledgement than I had expected, especially from my father, who had never been one to admit mistakes easily. Rachel finally looked up, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment and resentment. They're making me tell you about the necklace myself, she said. I found it in my glove compartment. I must have taken it off while driving to Jenna's party because it was catching on my seatbelt. I completely forgot about putting it there. And rather than considering that possibility, you accused me of stealing it, I said, keeping my voice level. You called me a liar to my face when I denied it. I was upset, she said defensively. I wasn't thinking clearly. Rachel, my father warned, his tone suggesting they had discussed her response beforehand. She sighed heavily. Fine. I was wrong to accuse you. I should have looked harder for the necklace before blaming anyone else. And I shouldn't have doubled down when you denied it. I'm sorry. The apology sounded rehearsed and somewhat reluctant, but it was an apology nonetheless, the first I could remember receiving from Rachel in years, possibly ever. We're selling the house, my mother said, changing the subject slightly. We found a buyer, though the offer was lower than we hoped. We're moving to a 2-bedroom apartment near Dad's new job next month. New job? I asked, turning to my father. He nodded, a mix of pride and humility in his expression. Assistant manager at Wilson's Hardware. Not exactly running my own business, but it's something. Your mother's working full-time at the department store now too. And I'm working at Starbucks and taking a gap year, Rachel added. Maybe longer than a year, actually. The university says I can reapply to the program when I'm financially stable again. The words seemed to pain her. Their collective humbling was evident, and I felt a complicated mixture of emotions, sympathy for their struggles, vindication that they were finally facing reality, and lingering hurt that it had taken such dramatic circumstances to bring about this awareness. I want to be very clear about something, I said after a moment. I didn't stop the financial support to punish you, though I understand it might have felt that way. I stopped because I realized our entire relationship had become unhealthy. I was enabling a situation where I was taken for granted and disrespected, while you were becoming increasingly dependent without acknowledging it. My father nodded slowly. We've had a lot of conversations about that very thing over the past months. When we saw that spreadsheet you sent, with all the payments laid out, it was a wake-up call. We had no idea it had reached that magnitude. How could you not know? I asked, genuinely curious. Did you think the mortgage was paying itself? That Rachel's tuition was covered by scholarships she never applied for? We knew you were helping, my mother said softly. But I think we deliberately avoided tallying exactly how much. It was easier to accept the help without questioning it too deeply. And I just assumed Mom and Dad were handling everything, Rachel admitted. I never thought to ask where the money was coming from. The waiter returned to take our food orders, another brief interlude in a conversation heavy with unspoken emotions. Once he left, my father leaned forward, his expression earnest. Ethan, we're not asking you to resume any financial support. That's not why we wanted to meet. We're adapting to our new reality, and while it's been challenging, it's probably long overdue. What we're hoping for is a chance to rebuild our relationship with you, not as a financial safety net, but as our son and brother. It was perhaps the most honest statement I'd ever heard from my father. The question was whether it was enough, whether words could repair the damage done by years of taking me for granted, followed by the ultimate betrayal of trusting Rachel's accusation over my denial. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But rebuilding trust takes time. And it would require real changes in how we interact as a family." "What kind of changes?" my mother asked. "For starters, regular family therapy," I said, having considered this requirement beforehand. "We have patterns of communication and behavior that need professional help to address. Individual accountability for financial responsibilities. And most importantly, a fundamental shift in how we treat each other with respect, consideration, and the benefit of the doubt." They exchanged glances, my mother nodding slightly. "We're open to therapy," my father said, surprising me again. "In fact, your mother and I have already started seeing someone to work on our marriage. Adding family sessions makes sense. And I've been seeing someone too," Rachel added quietly. "Working through some issues with entitlement and responsibility. My therapist has been pretty blunt about how I've been behaving." The fact that they were already seeking professional help was encouraging. It suggested a level of commitment to change that went beyond mere words. "As for the financial situation," I continued, "I think it's important that we're all transparent about our capabilities and limitations. I'm willing to help in genuine emergencies, but day-to-day expenses and lifestyle choices need to be based on your actual incomes." "That's fair," my father agreed. "We're learning to live within our means. It's been an adjustment, but not necessarily a bad one. There's a certain dignity in paying your own way that I'd forgotten." The conversation continued through lunch, covering practical matters like the house sale, my parents' new apartment, and Rachel's job search for a better position. There were moments of tension, particularly when Rachel slipped into her old patterns of self-focus, but overall, the tone remained constructive. As we finished our meals, my mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "We miss you, Ethan. The house feels empty without you, even with Rachel back home." "I miss aspects of our family too," I admitted. "But I don't regret establishing independence. It was necessary for all of us." We agreed to a tentative plan moving forward: monthly family therapy sessions, regular check-ins about how we were doing both personally and financially, and small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. No loans, no moving back home, no resumption of my financial support, just gradual, measured progress toward a healthier family dynamic. As we prepared to leave, my father insisted on paying for lunch. "It's not much compared to everything you've done, but it's a start," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. I accepted this small gesture for what it was: not repayment, but acknowledgement. A symbolic step toward a new kind of relationship. Walking to our separate cars afterward, Rachel hung back to speak with me privately. "I really am sorry about the necklace," she said, more sincerely than before. "I got scared when I couldn't find it, and it was easier to blame you than admit I might have lost Grandma's heirloom. I never thought it would lead to all this." "Actions have consequences, Rachel," I replied, not unkindly. "Sometimes bigger than we anticipate." She nodded, looking thoughtful in a way I wasn't accustomed to seeing. "I'm learning that the hard way." As I drove home to my apartment, I reflected on the meeting. It hadn't been perfect, and we had a long road ahead, but there had been genuine moments of accountability and a willingness to change that gave me cautious hope. Whether that hope was justified, only time would tell. 6 months have passed since that lunch at Giovanni's, and the changes in both my life and my family's have been profound. My apartment has become truly home, a space that reflects my personality and priorities without compromise. My career continues to flourish. I've been promoted to lead architect on our company's most innovative project, a responsibility that would have been difficult to manage while juggling my family's financial needs. Perhaps most significantly, I've developed a relationship with Megan, a UX designer I met through work. She's brilliant, independent, and understands the importance of healthy boundaries, qualities I've come to value deeply. Meeting her family was an eye-opening experience. Watching their respectful interactions showed me what family dynamics could and should be. My parents have settled into their new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a complex primarily occupied by other empty nesters and retirees. The downsizing process was difficult for them, particularly for my mother, who had to part with furniture and decorative items that simply wouldn't fit in the smaller space. But as the months passed, I've noticed a gradual shift in their perspective from mourning what they lost to appreciating the simplicity of their new lifestyle. My father has embraced his job at the hardware store with unexpected enthusiasm. His natural knowledge of construction materials and tools has made him popular with customers, and he recently mentioned being considered for promotion to department manager. The steady paycheck without the stresses of business ownership seems to have reduced his blood pressure and improved his overall health. My mother has found a surprising sense of purpose in her full-time work. After years of defining herself primarily as a homemaker, she's enjoying the camaraderie of colleagues and the satisfaction of earning her own income. She's even joined a book club with several coworkers, expanding her social circle beyond the neighborhood friends she'd relied on for decades. Rachel's transformation has been the most remarkable. After initially struggling with the adjustment to financial independence, she's found her footing in ways none of us expected. She left the coffee shop job after 3 months and secured a position as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm. It's not related to her interrupted master's program, but it offers better pay and potential for advancement. More importantly, she's developed a new perspective on education and career planning. Rather than rushing back to complete her degree, she's taking evening classes at the community college, paying as she goes, and being intentional about each educational investment. There's a newfound maturity in her approach that suggests the difficult lessons of the past year have truly sunk in. Our family therapy sessions have been challenging but productive. Under the guidance of Dr. Matthews, we've begun to untangle decades of unhealthy patterns. My parents have acknowledged their tendency to enable Rachel's entitlement, while taking my reliability for granted. Rachel has confronted her habit of manipulating situations to her advantage without considering the impact on others. And I've recognized my own role in maintaining these dynamics by silently shouldering burdens rather than communicating my needs and boundaries. The financial transparency we committed to has been revolutionary for our family dynamics. We now have monthly business meetings, where each of us shares our current financial situation, any challenges we're facing, and our progress toward goals. These discussions have normalized conversations about money that were previously avoided or conducted in vague, euphemistic terms. My parents have become surprisingly adept at budgeting. My father created a spreadsheet, with some technical assistance from me, to track their expenses, and they've found creative ways to reduce costs without sacrificing quality of life. They're even setting aside a small emergency fund each month, a practice I encouraged after noticing their anxiety about unexpected expenses. Rachel has opened her first investment account and regularly asks for my advice on financial planning. While I'm careful not to manage her money for her, I've enjoyed sharing knowledge about responsible saving and investing. Watching her excitement when her first stock dividend payment arrived was genuinely heartwarming. As for my own financial situation, the freedom from supporting multiple households has allowed me to accelerate my investment strategy. I've increased my retirement contributions, diversified my portfolio, and am considering purchasing a condo rather than continuing to rent. The financial foundation I'm building now will serve me well for decades to come. But perhaps the most significant changes have been emotional rather than financial. Our family gatherings, now held in neutral locations like restaurants or parks, have a different quality to them. There's more authentic conversation, less performative harmony, and a willingness to acknowledge tensions when they arise rather than sweeping them under the rug. During our most recent family therapy session, Dr. Matthews asked each of us to share what we've learned from this experience. My father spoke about the importance of honest self-assessment, and the danger of pride that prevents asking for help appropriately. My mother talked about learning to value people for who they are rather than what they provide. Rachel reflected on the relationship between privilege and responsibility, and how entitlement had blinded her to both. When my turn came, I shared that the most valuable lesson for me had been about the necessity of self-respect. Supporting others is meaningful only when it comes from choice, not obligation or manipulation, I explained. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people you love is to stop enabling patterns that ultimately harm everyone involved. Dr. Matthews nodded, adding that healthy relationships require both boundaries and vulnerability, seemingly contradictory qualities that actually complement each other. Boundaries show what we won't accept, she said, while vulnerability allows us to connect authentically within those boundaries. That insight has stayed with me, informing not just my family relationships but all my interactions. I'm learning to be clearer about my boundaries while also being more open about my feelings within those boundaries, a balance that feels both challenging and liberating. Last weekend, I helped my parents install some shelving in their new apartment. As we worked together, my father paused, put down his drill, and looked at me directly. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for your success or what you did for us financially all those years, but for having the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it meant standing against your family. That takes a kind of strength I'm not sure I would have had at your age." It was perhaps the most meaningful compliment he had ever given me, one based on character rather than achievement or utility. And it suggested that the painful rupture in our family had ultimately led to a more honest, respectful connection than we had managed in all the years before. The journey hasn't been easy, and we still have work to do. Old patterns occasionally resurface, requiring gentle but firm correction. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But we're moving forward with greater awareness and intention than I would have thought possible a year ago. If you're watching this and find yourself in a situation where your generosity is being taken for granted or your boundaries disrespected, I hope my story offers some perspective. Sometimes the hardest decisions, like walking away from people you love when they're treating you unfairly, are ultimately the most compassionate choices for everyone involved. True support empowers others rather than enabling dependency. Real love includes respect and honesty, not just sacrifice and service. And healthy relationships require balance, giving and receiving, speaking and listening, holding firm and letting go. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to establish boundaries with family? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? Leave a comment below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most important relationship to nurture is the one you have with yourself.